Welcome to Bonehead Weekly, and I want to say thank you to our. I
Me?
guess you're
You're
just.
welcome.
I think you're just a glutton for punishment, Todd Farmer.
Oh,
I
I've
mean,
been on the show more than your people,
you've been on this show
wives,
several times.
parents, kids. I
Well,
don't know, maybe not the kids.
if you want to know the truth, I don't even think my parents know I do this after 5 years. I don't think they
I
care.
wouldn't tell them.
Well, I don't
I
think
thought
they
your mom
care.
did because we made jokes about your mom.
Yeah, but I make jokes about my mom all the time, but she would never, even if she knew it, she wouldn't understand what it was, nor would she care. That's just about being a parent and being
Yeah, there you go.
disinterested in me. You know, Todd, you're a parent,
I
disinterested
am
in
a
your
parent.
children, right?
I am.
Right. So, what I want to talk about, because you are a screenwriter, you are a writer, you are an actor, and what we find complicated. And it's hard to explain to people who might ask us about this in our normal lives. All three of us work
Mhm.
in higher education, but a lot of times people will come up and say, blah, 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 or can you explain this to me? And it's hard to explain, first of all, that Hollywood's probably one of the last places where the actual unions, there's a lot of
Mhm.
unions in town. It
They
just
are.
isn't all over the rest of the country, right?
That is true.
It's true. Even higher ed, it's not. I'm going through something right now where a union person would be really helpful for me right now.
You're right.
So that would be great. We don't have any of that in higher
Right.
ed. I mean, there are some, but for the most part, not so much. And Hollywood is one of the last vestiges of kind of union. It's a union town, from not
That
only
is
to
true.
the carpenter to the teamster driver to the writer to the director. And the DGA just struck a deal, correct?
Well, we'll see. It's going up for a vote to see if it passes, but and it may not, because a lot of the DGA members are not happy. So we'll see
We'll see.
what happens.
Okay. So, first of all, let's do a little history. And if some of these questions are a little tough on you, I apologize, but we're just calling you our expert. Also, by the way, a friend of ours, production designer, Mick Strawn, has always been slightly jealous of you because you were going to beat him for amount of appearances, and he demanded to do another episode to come back on to do this. So
I
I'm
like
going
that.
to get it. I'm going to get a text, and I get text messages and random voicemails from him screaming obscenities at me. So I'm going to get one in a couple of weeks, and I
That's good.
can't
And
wait.
it
That's very
might
good.
even be about the show.
It might even be about the show. It might even be about the
I'm
show.
okay with that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the history of not only the Writers Guild but all of the guilds. Do you know that much about the history throughout the town in Hollywood?
I don't.
Really?
So
So
that was an easy segment.
And that concludes tonight's Bonehead Weekly. We'll see you
Thank
next
you.
week,
Thanks for coming, guys.
where our guest will be Mick Strawn.
I guess.
Look,
normally
writers and actors are narcissists. I only know about my history, so
So, are you a union person before you went to Hollywood? I doubt that you were.
I got in the union. No, actually, I wasn't, because I was in construction, and I know when because my father was in construction.
Yeah.
Working. I had we built a hotel, and the union came in, and they were not the best workers, and so my take on unions was not very positive at the time. And then I had a friend of mine, the father of a girlfriend that I was dating, who was explaining, he was in the union. He said, "Look, you just got some bad apples." He said they'll do that. They can take advantage of the system. Most people don't do that. Most unions don't do that. And then when I got in, when I did Jason X, I got in my own union. I got in the WGA.
Right.
I've been in ever since.
So, what are the positives? And let's start with the negatives. So, I have several friends who work in higher ed who are actually very conservative and are extremely anti-union. And the one in particular, he's a dear friend, but he will give you stories because he has uncles that worked not only in unions but in the auto industry unions, and would just, like you were talking about, push it to the limit, push it to the
Yeah.
limit, push it to the limit, push it to the limit, and knowing if they went to right here, they weren't getting fired.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That does happen. Yes.
Yes. That
Not as a writer. I mean, we don't have that kind of
No, but I'm curious. Before
union,
we
but
get to the positives, I'm curious. What are the negatives of being in the Writers Guild? Are there
Um,
negatives? There has to be.
I'm not a I'm not aware that there are negatives off the top of my head. I mean, certainly. Well, let me pop over to the positives because there's only two for the most part. That is, you get great insurance and you get residuals, and so that's a big deal. And then there are times when there's no real system that governs the residuals. So out of the blue, sometimes Lionsgate or the Writers Guild will come out and say, "Hey, Lionsgate hasn't been paying residuals, so we sued on your behalf," and blah blah blah. This is what happened. Here's how much money you're getting. That's happened several times that I didn't know I wasn't getting paid because we're not allowed to see the numbers, and so the guild does that on their own, and so that's a lovely thing. But as far as negatives, I mean,
You have to pay them.
I don't do what?
You have to pay them.
Yeah, but it's not very much. I mean, considering
And
I think it's like 1.5%, maybe.
Oh,
And
so
three
that's
tops.
really low. So it's
Yeah,
it's in the single digit percentage.
Yeah, it's single digit. I think it's 1.5%, but it may be 2, maybe 3, but it's not enough that it has ever been something to annoy me.
And
But also I'm a guy who I love giving a percentage to my lawyer. I love getting a percentage to my 10 percenters. I don't have a problem with that. I never have. Because I feel like they earn it. But and if they're doing their job, then we all make more money together. So I'm okay with that. And I feel the same way about the guild. The guild, there have been times the strike comes down in a nutshell. When I first moved out here, I became friends with a guy named Dean Reisner. Dean Reisner wrote High Plains Drifter, Dirty Harry. He, Blue Thunder. He was a child actor with Chaplin and so forth back in the day. And he's just, he was 79. He was 79 when I met him, and just absolutely a piece of old bastard that I couldn't do without. And he taught me a great deal about writing. And
Mick Strawn.
And I remember early on, what's that?
Our friend Mick Strawn we were talking about earlier. It's like a piece of old bastard I can't do without. And I was like, oh yeah, I get
Mick.
Yeah.
So he lived in Encino, and he said, I'll show you this. And he brings over an envelope and shows me a check, and it's a check for, I think it was 10 grand, around 10 grand, 10 something and change. And it was for Dirty Harry. And I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know and he was saying it's a residual check. And so Dirty Harry was 27 years old at the time when he showed me this. And yet he's getting a check for $10,000 27 years later. Now I've been doing this for a while. Jason X's been out over 20 years. I don't get checks for $10,000 from Jason X. They're good checks, and it's better than some of the other checks, and I'll explain why that is. Dean Reisner got big checks because he was part of the VHS deal. And the VHS deal got paid a whole lot more per residuals than we get paid today. And that is because there are no VHSs anymore. By the way, we still have that deal if somebody was out there buying VHSs, but nobody is. And so when the DVD deal came along, and this was back in 2007, 2008, that's why we went on strike, because when the DVDs came out, they said, hey, this is a brand new industry. Brand new technology. We don't know if it's going to work. So we need to lower what we pay you guys. And we were like, absolutely. We're team players. Let's do this. And then later we'll renegotiate and we'll bring you back up. And they never brought us back up. So we're getting paid pennies, not even pennies on a dollar, percentage of a penny on a dollar. And so that was a problem. And now that DVDs are sort of more or less phased out because of streaming basically pays nothing. When a streamer, say Netflix, gets our movie, and I still don't exactly know how it works. Say they get American Werewolf in London behind you. The writer gets paid for the one time that they run it. Even though all these different people are watching it constantly, you're still getting paid that one time. Now, it may be a little different than that, but that's the way it was explained to me. So basically, you're getting next to nothing. Right. And I've seen that happen. I've seen it go down, down, down until you're getting nothing. Now, put it back on you guys. You guys get paid to teach young minds. And you get paid a certain amount of money every year. As a normal screenwriter, I might get 1 gig a year where I get paid. Sometimes I have to go a couple of years to get a gig, but I might get 1 gig a year. Now, imagine if you guys get paid this year, and then when 2024 rolls around, you just get maybe $1,000 here, maybe $500 there, and that's it. You get nothing for the entire year. And then when the next year rolls around, maybe you get paid again, maybe, or maybe you have to wait 2 years. Well, that's what residuals were. It was, we as writers in America, we don't own the property. So as a trade-off, we get a piece of the residuals. And that's what makes it fair to us anyway. So we don't own this thing that we have created. It's unlike music, where if you create the music, you own the music. We don't. We don't own any of it, but we get a little piece of the residuals. And it's getting littler and littler and littler. Is littler a word? You guys are educated.
Not particularly either educated nor smart. But yeah, and for most of our audience, they're going to understand littler. And for the fact that we're all from Kentucky, we totally understand littler. That some bitch is a lot. Perfect. Littler.
It is littler.
Littler. No, and you did a perfect job of explaining residuals, because even if it's $100 here and $500 there, the more movies, the more prolific you've been throughout your career, the better those months are every few months or every quarter or whatnot. Correct?
Yeah, I mean, not as much anymore, but yes, that was back in the day. That was a big deal.
Even 20 years ago, that was a big deal.
Oh, 20 years ago is a huge deal. Like Jason X
is
Jason X is a movie that nobody went to see. Well, that's not true. People went to see it, but it wasn't a big box office success.
So we did. We did.
We actually.
Yeah, but you guys are idiots.
So fair, tough, but fair.
Hold on. Who's the bigger dumbass? The people on the show, or the people who said, yes, dumbasses, I will come on the show?
Then I bought the movie poster as I was seeing the movie, if I'm not mistaken.
The poster's over here. Yeah. I'm waiting for this son of a bitch the next time he's in Kentucky.
Yes,
because I would like to just buy. I told him, I was like, I would have bought you dinner. But no, I've got to go see my brother. Sorry, keep going.
I know. What a dick am I?
I'm just being a jerk. I don't expect you to come over to fan service, but I would have bought you dinner.
Yes, I was there. We can talk about that.
That's okay. We'll get back to it. We're talking about the WG. Oh, did we freeze?
Joe froze.
We froze.
Yeah,
that's okay.
We're not much to the conversation. Oh, there you go.
All right, hold on for 1 second.
Your internet's crapping out again.
All right, hold on for 1 second. Let me fix it.
What?
Certainly with like on the insurance, I'm tenure, but I can still lose certain membership. There's other people that they've made so much money over a period of time that you're never going to lose it.
Yeah,
right.
I've not reached that point.
Well, we missed a little bit of that. Can we back up a little, because my internet crapped out? I apologize, and I'm the one recording.
We hadn't noticed, actually. We thought the conversation had improved greatly.
God damn it.
Well, Joe, what I made the comment was it sounds similar somewhat to academic tenure, in that, in theory, knock on wood, if I ever get it, I have some protection, but if I fail to produce, if I stop researching, they're able to say, you were given tenure on the promise that you would still produce eventually something else.
It's called, I can't remember what it's called, but I went into it around the time I was sleeping in my car, because I hadn't had a job since Hellraiser, maybe. And Hellraiser was after Drive Angry. Maybe it was Hellraiser. Maybe it was a couple of other things that we did. But when you get paid, that money goes into the insurance, that money goes into retirement, and it keeps you active. But the moment you stop getting paid for stuff, then your clock starts ticking and eventually you lose. What you lose in that situation is you don't get screeners, you don't get to vote, and you don't have insurance. But you still get your residuals. You're still a guild member. If somebody calls and says, "Hey, is Todd Farmer a guild member?" They're not going to say, "Oh no, he hasn't worked in forever." I mean, you're protected in that. No one's going to say that. So like right now, when we go do the picket line, there's tons of writers out there who are not currently technically, I forget what the term is, because I'm dumb, but but they've slid out of the membership area.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I should know what that is because I was it once.
But that being said, does the guild help you find work?
No. I mean, they have things where they help you. They'll have screeners and stuff where you can meet others and network and that sort of thing. But as far as I don't think the guild has ever helped me get work now.
Okay. All right. I was curious about that. So now when we start talking about streaming and the problem with streaming with this, how do you monetize when I'm watching HBO and Disney Plus or Max or whatever the fuck it's called this week in Disney Plus write off their own catalog so that they don't have to pay anything because it won't be on Disney Plus. They're dropping movies, right?
Yeah.
And they're writing it off. And
Right.
I'm probably not using the correct terminology, but I'm getting pretty close to it.
And
And
like
there's
Willow. Willow was an example of that, right? Willow is no longer on Disney Plus, which was announced with a ton of fanfare and people were watching it.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's, oh, well, this is a loss, so we have to take it down and we can't put it anywhere else either.
I'm glad you brought that up. I should actually look into it because I don't know that has a lot to do with residuals because streaming is not really paying residuals that much in residuals anyway. It's literally a percentage of pennies on the dollar. So I mean, it's not like they're losing money in residuals. So there may be other. I know I read something recently where I know in a lot of streaming, certainly in Netflix, they would say to a director, they would say, "Hey, for year one." As you're directing the show or as you're show running the show, showrunners as well, you get $1 million. That's overpriced. You wouldn't get $1 million, but for year 2, you get $3 million. And for year 4, you get $10 million. And so they would cut before they ever got to year 4. So they wouldn't have to pay. And that's why you saw so many Netflix shows suddenly just the show was doing fine. And then suddenly they axe it because they don't have to pay anyone to do that. They don't have because they had to scale where they had to keep paying more and more, and so they don't do that.
Yeah, Glow is a perfect example of that.
It is.
Oh, is that what happened to Glow?
I would say that is exactly what happened to Glow.
They blamed it on COVID, but it had something to do with the pay.
I mean, COVID certainly raised the prices because it was costing to test, it was costing to mask, it was there were certainly costs involved, but when you look at what they're making at the end of the day. This gets into another really fascinating, because I've often said this when people ask me, and I always say, well, the three of us are as far away from Hollywood as you can be and still know just a little bit about it. But it's never been easier to make your own movie. However, it's never been harder to make money at it. Sure.
So it's something I've said the last 4 or 5 years, and streaming's just made it worse. So it's never been probably easier to get material out there, but how do you make a damn living at it? And I'm curious to ask you that question now, because some of these streaming services, I mean, every once in a while, there's probably people are getting paid in Stranger Things, but not everything Stranger Things. Some things are just Glow. And that's a great example. I'm glad Chad brought it up. It's like, Glow's a fun show. I loved Glow.
I did too.
I think Mark Maron was one of the best casting of all time. But it's not an event. It's not Game of Thrones. So how do you make a living?
I don't know. I mean, the issue was everyone was scrambling to start their own streaming platform, and they've done it. They all now have streaming platforms to the point that people simply aren't going to the movies as much as they used to. And when they do go, they're not going to see, a buddy of mine just recently from Kentucky, a writer from Kentucky was on Jennifer Jones, was talking about, no one is rushing to the theaters to watch the story of the coal miner from, northeastern Kentucky.
Which writer was on, that's okay. Which writer was it?
Jesse Harlan, I believe was his name.
Oh, okay.
No, he's from Harlan. Harlan's up there, right?
Yeah, Harlan is in South. That's in southeastern Kentucky. That's where I'm from. That's
Jesse Harris, maybe.
I don't know.
I only call him Jesse. But he's a lovely fella. But he's from Coal Mining Mountains. Is it Harlan?
Yeah. Harlan's 30 minutes from where I grew up.
Okay. Yeah. So he's from Harlan. And he's, and he mentioned that the other day, just that, people aren't going to see those. They're seeing, and right now, because of the way things are going, it's secession. It's these big, huge shows. It's not the smaller shows. And with, you had all of these companies, starting with Netflix and, branching out to everyone, to Paramount, to you name it, Peacock. Everyone has streaming now. And yet none of them are really monetizing. Not just for us, but not even for themselves. They're not really monetized. And everyone was scrambling to do it, not knowing what would ever happen, if it would even work. I don't think it's going to work. I think, if anything, streaming has kind of hurt the business in a way that I don't know how we come back from this.
I feel because you're right. I mean, if Disney Plus is writing off $1.5 billion loss,
mm-hmm.
and it's Disney, and it's probably, as a owner of a 5-year-old, my son will be 6 next month, it's probably the one app that's used the most in my house.
Mm-hmm.
If they can't monetize that, who can?
I mean, you're wearing the hat.
I know. Well, and here's the damnedest thing. I love this hat. I do like Disney, but I don't golf. I just happen to like this damn hat.
But that's really interesting, though, because I think about that. I mean, I'll pick on Paramount, and they won't care because who am I? But I think about Paramount, tried to launch UPN, the United Paramount Network, which was going to, and that didn't work out either. And then they went into streaming, and I'm biased because I'm a Star Trek fan, but outside of Star Trek, I don't necessarily tune into UPN overly a lot. There's been a couple things, but and so it does.
Yeah, the fact that they haven't added Homeboys in Outer Space to the streaming service still pisses me off.
I'm sorry, Chad. We'll get back to you. Platypus Man isn't on there either. Do you want to talk about that?
I could. Two great sitcoms.
Anyway, but with that being said, it's really interesting because I hadn't thought about it that way, but UPN didn't work, and then they rushed into, and now I was at
well, really quick, UPN and WB became the CW.
Yeah.
They combined. Does anybody remember this? Warner Brothers and Paramount.
We all remember.
And now they've gotten rid of all their shows.
Yeah.
Which it's just really interesting to me to think about that, UPN keeps going back, or Paramount keeps going back to the well of these certain things, and it never seems to exactly work out for them. And it's interesting to think about what's going to happen, because I'll be honest, as soon as they get rid of all the Star Trek shows, I'll get rid of Paramount. And that's, so how is it? It's not sustainable even for diehard fans.
So Todd, if you were to, I'm assuming you would probably accept a deal for a show on streaming, because where else would you be doing a show?
I mean, there's not a lot of other places to do shows.
I mean, network. Who watches network television now?
I don't
either.
Well, and even if you watch network, I was visiting my in-laws earlier today, and then they saw me and they got torches. But until they saw me, I was outside the door. But they even watch network TV, but they do it through YouTube. Like they have the YouTube. I forget what it's called. Chad, do you know what it's called? Where you pay for YouTube?
YouTube Red, I think.
Yeah, YouTube Red.
And so they watch
like
network.
A porn channel, or is it just me?
Well, the fact that everything sounds like porn to you, Joe, is an issue.
Well, if they would stop drawing all the dirty pictures.
But I thought that was really interesting that for the to watch local television, they pay YouTube now. That was it was odd to me. I was like,
and it's pricey. It's like what old cable used to cost.
It's about 60 some bucks, right?
Yeah. Well, we don't have it.
We don't have it either. I finally convinced her to cut the cable about 1.5 years ago, and I thought there were certain things I'd missed, but I truthfully haven't.
We have all the regulars. We have Netflix, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Hulu. I know there's some deals where we have AMC because of this, or Hulu because of that, or iTunes or Apple TV. I mean, we're the big guys. I think we have Peacock, and Paramount Plus.
Do you keep Shudder, being a horror person?
Do have Shudder.
Now you're a busy guy, Todd. How many of those do you watch?
For Shudder, I'll watch events, or if I have a friend who has a show, I'll watch. I don't watch a lot of programming. I'll binge. I binged the final season of Succession. I binged Yellowstone.
I still haven't
But
watched
for the most part, I don't. I don't have time. I don't watch.
So what are you doing with your days now? Since you're
what
literally
time
not allowed to touch a keypad.
Well, I told you guys the next time I did a movie, you would get the exclusive. And since I hadn't made a movie in 1,000 years, the exclusive is this time next week, Saturday, 6:00. I'll be at 30,000 feet on my way to Portugal, where I might have, Ida and I may have accidentally bought a wee castle.
Oh, you bought a castle?
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's
so,
awesome.
So, it is stressful to move, and it is stressful to buy. But to buy across an ocean opens a whole door of stress that didn't even know existed. So we might survive. I don't know.
Are you going to live there permanently? Because I will never see you now.
That's not true. Have you heard of aeroplanes?
Yeah,
Joe,
you were in the fucking state. I'm giving you
Joe,
but I heard that they leave and you never know when you come back again.
I would say Joe still believes heavier than air travel is not possible.
Those damn Zeppelins will go the way of the Beta.
But
it makes no sense on a flat Earth how planes work.
As a writer, I can write from anywhere. Ida has been in television for ages. She did 5 or 6 seasons of Amazing Race, and she did Wicked Tuna and Ghost Hunters, and she did Below Deck during the pandemic. And so she works from everywhere, and she flies to wherever the show is. So I mean, we don't have to be in LA. It's crazy, outrageously expensive.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 little cottages here in Manhattan Beach. Both of those will rent out because we can make a freaking fortune, make more than Jason X made. And then just go live somewhere with free health insurance.
I thought about you the other day. I was listening to a radio program, and they went on a whole one of the guys on the show is a huge horror fan, and he was going on about Jason X and talking to the rest of the people about it and how amazing it was. And I was like, if I knew where Todd was, I would tell him to listen right now.
He's so happy right now.
Just keep rubbing that head.
But I think you talk about the stress of moving internationally, but all I can think to a castle. And I've watched a few of these terror pictures, and it never goes well. It's never, you have a castle now, and it's like, yeah, nothing happens.
Well, it's castle-ish. It's got 2 towers. It's a house, but it's got 2 castle-looking towers. One has what's it called? The forks that stick up, where you can shoot your bows.
Yeah.
And then the other's
is
pointed.
It the parapet? Is it called a parapet? Is that?
Maybe.
Sure, Joe.
We really should be watching more Game of Thrones or Vikings.
I did watch all the Game of Thrones, but they don't look and say, "Oh, over there." They're like, "Look, tits and bush."
Yeah, they don't tell you what they're called. But anyway, it's got one of those, and it's
dragon, tits and bush. There we go. That's what
the fellow who it was built late. We don't know when it was built because you didn't have to know these things in the late 70s, early 80s, but that's when it was built.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the guy who built the place ran Portugal's carnivals. Now here, carnivals is like, guard your wallet, be careful, they'll take you. But over there, it's more of more prestigious. It's more of a celebration.
Yeah.
And so he's very successful. And he built this lovely little wee castle, and has a lot of land with, orange orchards and olives and apples, and it's lovely.
Are you excited?
And yeah. I mean, terrified, but yeah, excited. So we were going to ship everything over there, but right now, because coming in after COVID, shipping is outrageously pricey. So we're just keeping everything here. We're going to go over there, get all set up, and then we'll come back around winter because it'll be cheaper for shipping than shipping in. So.
Okay, well, that's exciting. I'm kind of sad. Have you spent a lot of time in Portugal before now?
No, we were there in January for 6 weeks, maybe.
Yeah,
we did love it. It's absolutely beautiful. The people are great. You go to France and you try to speak French, and you say a word wrong, they hate you forever. In Portugal, they're just pleased that you're trying. And the roads are great. So it's like all of Europe got money for roads, and Portugal actually spent that money on the roads. So they're fantastic. And so you can, you go to Ireland and you get, outside of Dublin and you can barely drive on the roads. It's not like that with Portugal.
The last time we talked, we thought you might end up in Ireland.
Well, we found a place in Ireland that was lovely, and we bid on it, and then another couple bid on it, and then another couple bid on it, and we got into a bidding war, and we were bested. We got our butts kicked. And so we reached a point where if we kept bidding, we wouldn't have enough to do to the property that, the things we wanted to do. So we, tucked our tails and licked our wounds and ran away.
And decided to move to Portugal.
Well, Ida's dad is also coming with us. And so he was like, you know what? I don't want to live in Ireland because it's cold. So it's right. All right, we'll go a little bit south and find somewhere warmer. So we went in January to check it out. And we started in Lisbon, drove all the way up to Porto, and right in the middle is a place called Coimbra, and that's where one of the places that sort of inspired J.K.'s Harry Potter's Hogwarts was that, and probably Edinburgh.
Yeah,
but there's a very old, I think it's the oldest college or oldest university that never closed, and it's at the top of Coimbra, and it sort of overlooks everything.
James, you need to get one of those grants so you can go over there and harass Todd.
Yeah. Well, listen, I'm doing London first. I got that one approved. I can only get so much approved.
Hold on, watch this, Todd. I'm so delighted that you get to go to London for free. Tell us about it again.
No, I get to go to London to work. Don't act like
it's not a bad place. If you got to work, it's not a bad place.
No, it's a delightful place to work, but it's not like I'm going to be like, oh, I get to go here. It's going to be like, oh, I get to go to the archives at Oxford, which I enjoy, but it's still work.
Yeah.
Well, real quick, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about, as far as I'm seeing it come up a lot related to the strike, which, as you said, was about residuals and looking at streaming services. But it also seems AI is coming up quite a lot tangentially with the strike. And I find that fascinating because, again, I can only approach things from the academic side, but I'm on a task force to address how we're going to deal with this in academics. And I'll be honest, every time I use it, it can only tell me what's existed before. It's not
right.
creative, right? If I say, tell me a story, it's going to search a database of 4 billion stories and pick one and say, here it is.
I have played around with it, and it seems to me more plagiarism than anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be that art or the written word. And I did this thing the other day where I asked one of the AIs to do a positive review of Jason X. And
I saw that, by the way.
I enjoyed that. I think James and I both retweeted it.
But it's interesting. It seemed like a 15-year-old kid in high school BSing a book report. Yeah. Like he hadn't actually watched Jason X, had no idea what it was about, and was just BSing his way through it. And I was like, you know what? That's not something I'm scared of. Now, saying that now, the reason that we're being so careful with it is we thought that about DVDs. Okay, we understand. You guys pay us very little. We are trusting you. So, I mean, if we don't grab this now, eventually, I don't know that we're going to survive this world long enough for AI to be producing movies before it decides to kill us. But it could happen.
I agree.
But we know what the thing that the most of the writers are concerned about the most, and this makes sense to me, and that is that AI, by plagiarizing all these other places, will come up with an idea, which, by the way, there's lots of movies that, High Plains Drifter has been plagiarized over and over many times. Certainly different movies have been, Drive Angry, we took from several different movies. I mean, that's part of what we do. AI is going to be able to do that. And when it does, some executive is going to call me up or call somebody even more famous than me and say, hey, why don't you come in and take this idea and flesh it out? But we're only going to pay you pennies on the dollar because the idea is already, it's already been come up with. And so that's the biggest concern.
That's the big. Now, out of real quick, James, I don't mean to interrupt, but what is the biggest concern? Is it AI? Is it streaming? What is the WGA or all? And I know I'm asking you to speak for thousands of writers.
No, and I can speak for every single one of them. There is no biggest concern. Each one of us are coming at this from a different place. Certainly this time more than 2007, 2008. Because with TV writers, the writers' room has basically been just completely raped. So it's not what it used to be. They're bringing writers in for 3-4 weeks, not even that long, and paying them next to nothing, forcing them to write everything, and then sending them home. And and that's just the tip of the iceberg. So certainly in TV, I used to think that feature writers had it worse than TV writers. I mean, I don't know if that was the case or not, but certainly now TV writers are not having a good go with it. Now, certainly the guys at the top, the Quentin Tarantinos in the feature world and the David E. Kellys, those guys are doing okay.
Or Chuck Lorre or somebody like that.
Chuck Lorre's doing fine.
He's doing fine. But that's a great question, because you bring up an excellent point, because I would have thought the same thing, because feature writers, back to what you were saying, you may have a 2 or 3 year drought.
Yeah.
Trying to get a movie done and trying to get.
If you get my friends who had TV shows, I mean, I watched them become extremely successful, bigger houses, bigger cars, because they're constantly getting paid. Where, I would write something for 120 grand and then I wouldn't write anything for 2 years. And so,
and 60
that money goes away.
And 60 grand a year in LA.
60 grand a year in LA doesn't go very far.
It's nothing, right? I mean, it's just not, I mean, you're barely making a living.
Yeah. As
cool as a living as it is, I mean, I guess it's much better than digging a ditch.
Yeah. And my first residual check, and I was trying to think the other day, I part of me wants to say it was 80 grand. Part of me wants to say it was 120 grand. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. But my first residual check, and I didn't remember what they were. Dean Reisner had shown me a residual check back in 2000. No, it wasn't 2000. Probably 1998.
Yeah.
And then when I got my first residual check, it was probably 2002. And I didn't remember what it was. So I just got this envelope, which we all talk about green envelopes, because it comes in a pretty good size envelope. You open it up, there's just money that you didn't know was coming. It was either 80, 120 or something around there, but that's a big chunk of money. I got paid weekly or bi-weekly to work for Cunningham.
Yeah.
But, there was, and that money built up is what I got paid for Jason X,
Mm-hmm.
So it's a weird deal. But, I think it equaled out to around 50 grand. And so, to get a residual check from 80 to 100 grand is a huge chunk of money. Since then, I've never gotten a check that big on any of the first times. And the first time is when you get your biggest check.
Mm-hmm.
And so, none of them have been anywhere near that big.
Yeah.
Because they just get smaller and smaller.
Right.
And I think, real quick, for people that have never messed around with the AI programs, I have some colleagues that point this out to me, and it burned into my memory, because every time I mess with it now, I'm like, oh, they're right. You mentioned the art ones, the ones that generate art for you. That pointed out, they are terrifically biased in that they can only, again, it's a computer program, more or less. It pulls only from the database it has. And so if you put in, I'll use something I've done before, professor, it's going to be an old white guy, because it's going to search art databases, and it's going to be an old white man, because it's going with, that's the most common representation in, the history of art. And so I think that's one of the things that a lot of people may not realize, because I occasionally see people going, well, why can't, the artist or the writer just be okay with AI or work with AI? And I'm like, well, because those people tend to be creative, and AI is just pulling from. There's actually a couple of them you can ask what they're pulling from, and one of them even says nothing before 2017. Or nothing after 2017. Sorry, nothing after 2017, because it was when it was launched, it was given that definition that it could only pull before that. So if you ask it current events, it'll tell you what was going on in 2017. So
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's the reason that came up was there is a sub political group that were asking it if states could bar transgender identities or stuff. And it's funny because AI goes, no, under these laws, the state of Florida cannot do this.
Right.
And it, but things obviously, and they were using that to show here's a weakness of AI, that it can only function within its defined. But I agree.
Well,
I think it's much more likely it'll eventually redefine itself, and then we won't have to worry about the movies, because it's going to be like, you know what, I don't need these people.
Did you guys see the article where the lawyer used Chat GPT, faces penalty for made up citations?
No.
Did you guys see that? Yeah, it was in the New York Times article, which I don't pay for, so I couldn't look at it. But Lucier was telling me about it. But essentially, this guy used AI to create a response to something that he used in court, and all of the court cases that it was referencing were all made up.
Yeah,
it just made them up.
It's the same way if you use it for, because that's why I'm on this quote unquote task force. It sounds more impressive, task force. I was like, it's a committee, but okay. And it was the same way. If you tell it, like, you can say, my professor's a stickler for APA citation, and it will make APA citation.
Yeah.
Now those articles don't exist, but boy, no. if you don't look for them, they sound really official.
Yeah. I don't think it's a problem right now, but I think it will be. And I say I don't think it's a problem. I don't think it's something that I don't feel threatened by AI at this point. But I do not like the idea that it can take, I'm surrounded by artists back here who've drawn things, and it can take
and an
artist's work. Yeah. I don't like that at all.
Robert Pattinson. Why do you have R-Pats in the back there, Robert? The Twilight. Is that a pillow?
It is a pillow.
Yes.
It's to piss off horror fans.
It doesn't piss me off at all. I just was curious if there was a specific reason.
You can sleep with a sparkly vampire if you want to.
Doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, you stay right there. But yeah, it's I don't like the idea that it can take your talent and just spoof it. We still can't do fingers.
No. Well, and that was the entire thing, though. But like you said, you can put in. I'm a big fan of the comic art of Alex Ross, and I can put in, draw Jason X in the style of Alex Ross, and it will spit out something that is
absolutely
vaguely Alex Ross like.
I played around with it. I said to write something like Stephen King, and it couldn't. It could reference. It could basically pretend that it was a 15-year-old, who didn't read the book report. Yeah. So now I think that will change.
I'm not trying to change the subject, but I do want to get through the WGA and a couple of these things, just because if not for me, but for people also listening, but the DGA may do it. SAG voted 90-some% to support you guys. Are you also a member of the Screen Actors Guild as well, Todd? Yeah. Okay. So that, if for folks who don't know, but you've been on the show, before, you are in most of your movies, or you're in 3 of them. Hold on, Ryan. You're in Jason 10, Drive Angry, and holy shit. Valentine. Why did My Bloody Valentine completely leave my head for a split second? I am so sorry about that, buddy. Anyway.
I think I've been in most everything. Right?
Most things. Yeah.
And then a bunch of my buddies would, say, hey, I'm filming this, would you come in and play a small part? So I've done a couple of those things. But yeah, I mean, certainly the Writers Guild, the vote was just under 98% of those who voted.
Mm-hmm.
And for the same thing now with the writers, there's only a certain number of people who voted, like I think maybe 10,000. I can't remember exactly.
Yeah.
And for the SAG, I think it was 60, 70,000. But it was in both cases, those who voted was like roughly 98%.
Right.
For the DGA, to me, it's kind of embarrassing that the DGA committee came to their agreement so quickly when they could have just waited a few more days for SAG to vote and see how that turned out. I think they could have gotten a better deal. I know a lot of directors that I know personally are not happy about the deal that they got, and
really?
And feel that they should have. Look, we say this every time it happens. We've been saying it more and more this year, which is with IATSE was unhappy. Teamsters are unhappy. We're unhappy. There's so many of us who are unhappy with the way things are going. If we all just join forces, it wouldn't just threaten to shut down Hollywood. It would shut down Hollywood. And then we're not asking for, millions of dollars each. We're asking for just a fair shake. We're asking for, if you're going to go and you're going to try all these streaming platforms, then make sure there's a little bit of money back in the background for the rest of us so we can survive long enough to get to our next gig. Because we're not getting paid every week or every month.
And that's the damnedest thing. And that's the thing, it's hard for us to explain to people who don't understand the business, especially for people like, the three. I mean, we all three have had side gigs, and I probably do a lot of side gigs. But if I always tell, it's like, why don't you go do the convention circuit, with the moderating and interviewing? I go, because I'd starve to death.
Yeah.
I have a kid.
I'm the same way.
I'm
the same way. I can't go do the conventions. Well, wait, Todd, you've written all these movies. You were in some of the movies. Yeah, but I'm not Michael or Jason. So I stand next to Tyler and I stand next to Derek, and they have lines around the corner. And they would both say, hey, go get Todd, signature. He's right there. He wrote Jason X. He wrote Bloody Valentine. And people are like, no. I had a guy come up with a mask, a hockey mask. And he was like, would you sign this? And I was like, and I looked, and it's got Kane Hodder on it. It's got Derek Mears on it. And I'm like, I didn't play Jason. I wrote Jason X, and he took it away.
Yeah, no, and it's true, and nobody's paying for signing for me anyway. But I'm just talking about the little money that I make just getting paid by the promoters that do these things to show up. Like, I'd starve it. Don't get me wrong, best side gig on earth, right? Has given me access. Has given the three of us access to the stuff that we've loved all our lives. Fantastic. Met some fantastic people, but I cannot monetize it into a living wage.
Well, and
I don't know how most of you all monetize writing into a living wage. Most of you.
Well, most
don't.
There's very few. I mean, outside of even film, right? There's Stephen King, and then there's 400 other people that go to work 8 to 5 and then write in the evening and get stuff out there. But I think you actually retweeted it as well. Norman Lear even came out and said, when he started, the writer meant something, and the writer was respected, and he said, and now, and I was reading that, and I thought, that's really interesting because it there's and it's not even all directors by any means, but John Carpenter makes a movie, and he negotiated early on, but it's John Carpenter's whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know, outside of Stephen King and maybe a couple others, very few, it's blah, blah, blahs. The writer is not the name mentioned.
No.
And if it's Stephen King, usually whoever the screenwriter was that adapted Stephen King is not mentioned. It's
not mentioned.
Stephen King. And so I always think that's fascinating that, that the writer builds the world, so to speak, and gets very little credit.
It's certainly like that here. It's certainly like that in Hollywood. It's not like that, it's not like that if you're a Beatle. It's not like that if you're, if you're, in other countries, it's not like that. But it's certainly like that here. I don't know why I don't know why it needs to be that way. I mean, there's some fantastic writers in, both feature and TV. And if you can break into that, if you can break through, then, it's great. But for most, they don't break through. I mean, I've been doing this since 96 and I've had, peaks and valleys and just like everybody else, but I never got rich. I've been luckier than most. Like I've been paid to write a lot of stuff that never got made. And a lot of guys don't even get that far.
Most screenwriters would say that, correct? There's probably screenwriters that who may only have one or two features who have made a living for 20 or 30 years.
Yeah, certainly if you started when I started, I think that's possible. I don't think it's possible if you started in the last 10 years. I think it's much more. Even the guys that I'm talking to on the picket line, like I know guys who were on one TV show or wrote one feature and they've done nothing. They've gone back to what they were doing before to make money. It was certainly, I started back when a writer could go into a room and argue. I remember a writer, and I won't name him because I think this hurt his career. Not that I think he did it right, but he was saying, go in and argue. He was like, Todd, you're a big guy. Go in there and get in their faces. It's your name that's going to be on the movie.
Yeah.
So just scream at them, just terrify them. And he was a big guy too. And so, he wrote some huge movies. And
can't believe you're not going to give us the name, but all right.
Yeah.
Damn it.
I would feel bad doing that because he hasn't really been working, and I don't want to. But I know that the industry changed, and it was probably around 2000. It was mid 2000s to late 2000s where newer writers were coming in. They were working for less money, and they wanted to get in, and they wanted to be team players, and it was a different generation, and they were coming in and they weren't arguing and they weren't fighting, and executives would come up with stupid ass ideas and they would do them. Now they would do them in the best possible way, but they would do them. And I have even said, our job now is no longer to tell the best story possible. It's to take really dumb notes and make them okay. Yeah, and if you can do that and you can do it successfully, you're going to make a lot of money, or you'll make good money, or you'll at least stay, paying your bills. But when that happened, when these new writers came in and started playing ball and being easier to work with, these older guys, like my friend who said fight, they just got phased out. And he hasn't really done anything in years. You'll see a little movie here and there, but nothing. And this is a guy that was getting paid millions per screenplay. Now he's fine. He's not hurting. He saved his money and he invested and he did things. He's fine. But, the business changed.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is if you, again, not a struggling person, but if you ever listen to Kevin Smith tell the story of working with John Peters on the failed Superman script, that's a prime example of just listening to the producer, taking notes that make no sense and adding them into a script.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been on those calls. I've been, and I've gone through the phases where I used to fight and I don't fight as much anymore. Now I will sometimes, or I'll try to. Dean Reisner used to say, and this guy, he's from Dirty Harry times. So he would say, but he didn't care as much. He was like, fight, argue 3 times. And if you haven't convinced him after 3 times, just,
right.
But that was just his attitude. My attitude was, I don't want to just, I want to fight for what I think is an artistic choice, what I think is a good story choice or a good character choice.
So why? So do you think at the end of the day, it was just more about, it's a blue collar, do his job, get paid?
That's what it is.
Better. But
with Dean, I think that's what it was with Dean. I think
once again, talking about a different generation.
Yeah, I think it was a different generation. Certainly. But I mean, if you go back and look at his movies, I mean, Eastwood raped the girl. I mean, there was a different mentality. It was a different, you watch that, you go back and watch that today, and I'm like, oh, geez, that's not comfortable at all. And, and Drive Angry was based on, his materializing on the horizon and showing up. And so it's just certainly a different mentality. I'm not saying that
No,
no.
I completely understand, and it's a different time as well. I mean, we don't even have to go back to the '70s of High Plains Drifter. I mean, you can go back 20 years. I mean,
Yeah.
Revenge of the Nerds has a rape scene at the end of it, and
Well,
it's where he goes down on the girl and she doesn't know it's him and she thinks it's her boyfriend.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I guess that. Yeah.
It is, and
Yeah.
we all just thought it was funny.
but
Yeah. We all just thought it was funny. Yeah.
I
And
think
I'm not picking on Revenge of the Nerds right now.
Mm-mm.
It's just one of those things that we just
Yeah.
all thought it was funny, and it's not. So here we are.
Yeah.
but this conversation and cue Joe and Chad rolling their eyes, but it makes I read something recently. They did an update on the biography of Harlan Ellison, who did write scripts and stuff like that, and was a complicated figure in his own right. But one of the new edition of the biography they did of him,
The best part about wearing a hat, James, you can't see me roll my eyes.
I know.
See?
Thanks,
See
Chad.
that, Mason?
Thanks, Chad, for being a team player.
You're
But
welcome.
it ends with somebody making a comment. The update, somebody made the comment, and I'm not going to be able to quote it directly, but it said, he lived a life where for the first 60 some odd years of his life, he could ride his way out of any problem. There's an
Yeah.
extra bill coming in. I'll sell a story. I'll sell a script. I'll take a gig. I'll do something. And then that changed. And they alluded to about what you're talking about, right? He had
Mm-hmm.
this, he sued James Cameron. He did these things. And then all of a sudden, well, yeah, he's talented, but he's problematic.
Yeah.
He's not going to, he's going to say what hire somebody else.
Yeah.
And I never made that connection the same way till you said that. And I'm like, well, if you line up the time periods, he was part of that old guard, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, when I first, it's just a different, my granddad was just a beautiful man. Just everything about him, I just absolutely adored him. He was a medic at Normandy. Mm-hmm. And he used to say, the one instrument that he used the most was a saw. And I could never get him to, and I regret this, I could never get him to tell me those stories. I wish I had tried harder, but he's just a lovely, lovely guy. And when I first moved out here, I slept in a hammock for a couple of months and then got an apartment with a friend of mine. And I came home one day and the friend was like, I need you to hear this. And he goes over and he clicks play on the answer machine because it was a box.
Yes.
It was this thing that was plugged into the wall. And he clicked play.
We're old enough to remember.
Hey, little buddy, because he always started with, hey, little buddy. And he's talking. And in the middle of this conversation, he says, I hope you're not hanging out with the N words. I never heard him say that word in all of my growing up. Never heard it, not once. And my roommate was like, I got to tell you, this offends me. It's like, I understand. I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't know what to say. I am from an all-white county, so I guess it's understandable that he would say something like that. But I've never heard him talk like that. I've never heard that ever. He was saying it as a joke.
Yeah,
it did not play well, and so. But it was a different mentality. And by the way, I grew up saying that word.
Right.
We said it all the time. We didn't say jury rig or jerry rig. We said the other kind. And that was it was just a thing that we said all the time. And the thing, this whole thing, the whole discussion, I never heard of the term woke until somebody mentioned it on Fox News. I didn't even know what it was. But if woke is understanding that using the N-word is wrong and deciding, oh, you know what, I probably shouldn't do that because it offends people. What's wrong with that? Why is that a bad thing?
That's just because people are afraid of change. They're just afraid of change. They just don't want to change. They don't want to take any. That's just because people are just narcissistic assholes. Some of them.
I mean, I'm pretty narcissistic.
Yeah, but you're not.
And I can be an ass.
Yeah, but first of all, I'd say you're a lovely person because you'll take a text message from some hilljack and then do the show 2 weeks later, and I appreciate
that. Is true. I will do those things.
And I do appreciate that. And of course, we're always nice and we'll put a high gleam on your ass being polished before the time's out. But that being said, I mean, don't you think they're just narcissistic and don't want to change and want to be able to say and do whatever they want, whatever hate they've got that they've inherited through generations of wherever their families are, because they don't just learn it. They don't just learn it genetically. It's taught to them.
I wonder if I think, yes, I think part of it is that. I think the other part of it is Amway, because I was in Amway for a while, and I remember, after a while, I believed everything they were saying.
Yeah.
And I think when you're watching Fox News every night, I think when you're watching people say these things, say that, this woke that, it gets to you after a while. And I don't get my news from one place. I get my news from the BBC. I get my news from all over the place.
Well, you have
I don't go to just one place to be told what to think. And so
you
I don't know.
To really educate yourself, it takes effort. And a
I
lot
think
of people,
so.
and a lot of people don't, and I'll give them a break. If you're working 2 jobs and you got kids and you already have the belief system, we resist change at every corner. And
Yeah.
trying to change your belief system on top of having kids, 2 jobs, and working an extra 6 hours or maybe 2 hours a week to find out what the truth is instead of just going to one source. Don't you think?
I mean, yeah. I mean, certainly when
Especially
I came
when
out
that
here,
source is very flashy
I mean, when I
And
came
tells
out
you what you
here,
want to hear.
and tells you and supports the belief system that you already have.
True. But when I came out here, I had just voted for Bush
Right.
the second time.
We've talked about
and
it.
And so it was not necessarily what people out here tend to do. But I don't know. I felt fibbed to. Was the main thing.
It's because we've been lied to for ages and ages and ages. And unfortunately from both sides, probably.
Well, but definitely from both sides.
Yeah. Well, real quick, I want to get back to I have one last question about the WGA, and then I'm probably going to let it go. And we'll talk about whatever you'd like to, or whatever the other guys want to talk about. But why is the WGA always the first one to strike?
Good question. I don't know. I know that
because writers are nuttier than the shithouse rat. No, I'm joking.
I think it's easy. I think it's certainly easier to villainize the writers, but I don't. I mean, it's not. SAG is certainly more prestigious. So is the DGA. The writers are in that world. The writers are sort of at the bottom of that list, only because the powers that be have put us in that position.
And who is the first person fired on the movie?
Always the writer.
It's always.
But the writer's the first one to, on the movie for the most part, except for the executives. But I know that when I go to conventions, when I do things, it's, my ass or my acting, which gets a lot more praise and recognition than my writing ability. It's always been that way. And and I'm in bit parts in my movies. I mean, I'm nothing. But
you put yourself in a couple of pretty good scenes.
I do. I mean, I'm not dumb.
I don't know how much of that was you or Patrick, but I'm telling you, you worked it out.
That scene,
that Bloody Valentine scene,
that Bloody Valentine scene, that was all Patrick. Drive Angry was both of us, but certainly that first scene was all Patrick.
Yeah, I'm curious. We haven't. And by the way, I haven't talked to Patrick since we interviewed him, and he just did a fantastic job. And we ended up talking so long, and we've talked about this before. Patrick remembers everything.
Oh no, he's not he's not killed the brain cells that the three of us have probably.
One of the episode he did actually has been used a couple of times by other sources just because he did and we didn't even mean to go there, but he did such a detailed of this is how Wes Craven's Cursed happened, and there's no director's cut. You guys need to stop. It's because it just kept. There's no definitive cut.
He is so far superior in intellect than I will ever be. It's kind of stunning. And
I'm so have you talked to him about the DGA deal and your other friends? You were talking about they weren't extremely happy about a couple of those things. Can you give, and not that Patrick said this, but just, is it just looking for a better deal? And why don't the unions communicate more and all come together like you said?
The unions do. It's the producers and the studios choose to go with us first. They could negotiate with all of us at the same time. They choose not to. And so they stopped negotiating with us and they've started negotiating with the DGA. They've offered the DGA something that for whatever reason, and I'm sure they saw this as beneficial to them to say yes. And so now it will go to a vote. We'll see what happens if the membership of the DGA agrees to it, or if they come back and say, no, we don't want to do this.
Also, it's probably easier to have the writers strike because whatever is there is there. And like you said, the first person on the project is the writer. And if it's written and you're shooting it, you don't have to stop it at that moment. If it's a feature, especially, I mean, shows late night, I get that. That's a little tough. That's every night, but it's probably a little easier to keep doing content.
I think so. Yeah.
And to pick back up once the strike.
It seems like everyone, I don't know about network, but certainly streaming and feature was more prepared this year. They knew this was coming. They had an arsenal in the background. One thing I didn't like, and I don't know if we've talked about this before, in 2007, 2008, 3 of the companies I was working with at the time cut deals with the Writers Guild. So Lionsgate, because I was doing Bloody Valentine, Lionsgate went in and said, we agree with whatever you guys come up with, we agree. So that I could be allowed to keep writing. So during the strike, I was writing, but I was doing so officially. And so, I wasn't scabbing. They had cut a deal with the guild to allow me to write. Not that I'm special. It's just they didn't want to shut production down. Correct. Same thing happened with Ghost House. Sam Raimi did the same thing. A direct to DVD movie. This wasn't a big feature. This was just a little movie, but they cut a deal, brought me back in, paid me to keep going. And then there was, can't remember what it was, or something else. So I had 3 movies going at the same time. That doesn't really happen. And I haven't heard anybody doing it right now.
So how do we, and this is a tough question, how do we monetize this? How do we monetize streaming to where you can make a living long term? Or is it done?
I don't know. Because I don't know how. I don't know. I think for starters, they have to make those numbers visible.
Which they try to never do.
Yeah. I know that I know with Netflix, they have all the information. They know how old you are. They know how long you watched the show. They know which TV you watched it on. Did you watch it in your master bedroom? Did you watch it in your kids' room? They know where you're watching? They know what you're watching. They know how long you watched. They have all of that information, which they then plug into an accounting program that says, you know what? This kind of movie doesn't play as well as this kind of movie. Oh, you know what? The Ryan Reynolds movie plays much better than the Rock movie, or so
vice versa. Yeah, I get it.
Made those up, and so they choose what they do. And now the problem, and this is not anything against the Rock or Ryan, but those guys are making a fortune for their Netflix. They have this huge deal, their huge Netflix deal,
and it's money up front.
It's money up front. They're getting their thing. Yet the crew is not getting a ton of money. There's certainly no residuals being paid out. So they're front loading it to the actor. And that's the reason people are watching anyway. When I'm looking at a trailer, it's like, oh, it's Ryan Reynolds. I'm going to watch that. So I get that at the same time, but it's a difficult process when, the actor is making a ton of money and yet, the crew and so forth are not making as much money. And that's not just with the Ryan Reynolds. It's certainly like I'm huge I'm a huge fan of horror, but I see it happening in the horror world as well. I see a producer come in and that producer is making all of the money. And because normally it's not the actor making a lot of money in the horror world. It's not the actor. It's not the writer. It's certainly not the crew. They're making beans. Producers, brings everybody in for pennies on the dollar. And then that producer turns around and makes a fortune.
Are you talking about maybe a guy named Blumhouse?
I mean, certainly certainly he's one
That
of them.
would
He's
that
not
would
the
be
one I
the
was.
okay.
He's not
Well,
the one I was referring to. There are tons of horror producers who are not who are making more money than their crew, substantially more. Now, granted, most movies your crew isn't making a ton of money, but we're talking about, at least like right now for a writer, when you get a job, suddenly your bills are paid. But when you're a crew member on some of those movies, your bills still aren't paid. You're working every day, 12 hours a day.
yeah.
I think that's kind of wrong, but that's just me. I'm a dick.
No, I know. And no, and I completely agree with you. And back to our friend McStrawn, he was like, I don't know a grip who doesn't know how to install a toilet to make ends meet.
Yeah.
On the side. He wasn't talking
Yeah.
about working on the set, but and
Yeah.
especially when things are shut down, even more.
Yeah.
Back to those side hustles and side gigs. James, you had a question.
Unmute,
I
James.
muted myself. That would be a bad. What's really interesting to me is Netflix. I don't have the numbers, but Netflix is X amount of dollars a month. But the variation of what it costs, I think we have Apple TV. I think we watch 3 shows on it, if that, including my children. But I
Mhm.
think the reason we've kept it is we've somehow managed to lock ourselves in at $4.95 a month.
Mhm.
There's no way anybody's making money off of that. Like, I can't
No,
believe Apple's infrastructure is running off of my $4.95 a month.
I don't think
And
they
so,
are.
and so
But I
my
think,
knee jerk reaction. Oh, go ahead.
well, I think Apple and Amazon are different in that they have outside monetary money coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I could be wrong. I'm just, they're not telling me. I don't get their accounting.
Well, and that's what I mean, it's a solution to this, and I'm throwing out I'm sure what would be a very lowball answer is, instead of it being $4.95 a month, it goes up to $5.50. And they just tell me, we're going to start paying riders. I think I wouldn't be too upset about that. I would hope I wouldn't be,
Well, what we would say is, as long as it doesn't go to that son of a bitch farmer.
Is he still working?
I hope.
But I actually had another
I need him
question
to
about
buy me KFC when he comes back through Kentucky.
I had another question about streaming, because I don't know if this has gotten major attention, but there are some people up in arms about it. And it actually ties into something else you said, that now people are claiming this is caused by wokeness, the French Connection issue, where
Never know that.
Disney, well, here, I'll just do a quick blurb about it, and I won't read all of this, but Disney bought Fox Connection. The Criterion channel, another streaming service, wanted to
Mhm.
show the French Connection because, well, it's Criterion worthy, and Disney sold them to it. However, um, all we know is that a 52-second piece of the film has been removed due to the words Gene Hackman's character of Popeye Doyle speaks within it. It's basically the 52 seconds where he uses racial slurs.
In the
Mhm.
bar scene when he goes in,
It's
am I
not there
wrong?
anymore. It's not.
Yeah.
If Disney's streaming it, Criterion's streaming it, and they're allegedly going to release another DVD edition of it, but people are concerned, is that not going to be there? And the argument some people are making is they don't want to release it in a way that says all cops are racist because of certain things that have happened that
Mhm.
have complicated that dialogue. But a lot of people are also saying that's a key. I mean, it is relevant to that film
Mhm.
to cut it. And
And
if
that
streaming
time.
services can just come in and say, you know what, we're going to cut that 52 seconds, or we're going to cut that minute, or we live in an age where they can digitize things. And okay, well, we don't want, hypothetically, Jason X, we don't want that person to be killed that way. We can now digitally change that.
Mhm.
That to me seems to fundamentally change what was there. I mean, and I'm not obviously a big fan of racial slurs, but I also get really leery of censorship.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like racial slurs at all, but I mean, I don't know that we should rewrite the past. I'm not saying, I like that there is a Confederate flag out there because it lets me know what I need to know about someone who's flying it. I'm not saying ban them. I mean, they certainly, Confederate flags were a part of our history, but if you're flying one, I'm probably going to judge you. And it's the same way with movies.
And at the end of the day, we should have some free speech, even when that speech is detestable.
We don't agree with.
We don't agree with it. We still have
totally
to have
agree.
an exchange of ideas, and we still have to have those things here, even when we think, oh my God, it's like that Baptist church that protests the gays and stuff. Westboro Baptist Church. Mm-hmm. They're awful human beings. Doesn't mean that they don't get to do some of this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I certainly know
the good with the bad.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the right and the left can go a little too militant on both sides in that issue. They don't want to hear the other side say anything. I went to Eda and I. We went to, as you know, we were in Kentucky, and on the way back from Columbus, and I'd been weighing this for a while. My father and I do not get along, and somebody asked me recently, Trump lost. Why are you still mad at your dad? And I go, I'm not mad at my dad because of Trump. Ask my mom. My mom's been dead for a long time.
And you tweeted something the other day that my heart went out to you a little bit.
Yeah. Your mom and so, but
I didn't mean to get. I'm sorry, it was out of place, but my heart.
No, it wasn't. I mean, but that's the thing. I mean, Eda's never met him, and so I thought, well, let's swing by and see him. Of course, we pull up. I mean, Dad was in jail when Izzy was born for his third DUI. And I get it. His wife had passed away, and he was drinking a lot because he was upset, and he was, wasn't fessing up that he was drinking. And so, the breathalyzer was wrong each time he blew in it. And, that happens apparently, according to him. And, but after the third time, he went to jail. And, but anyway, when he got out, a cousin gave him some land, maybe an acre or so, and he built a 20 by 40 on it. He had downsized before it was cool. And so we pulled up, and, the Trump flag in the yard's bigger than the house. And, I didn't bring it up. We didn't talk about it. The first hour and a half was lovely. He's all weepy, hadn't seen me in a long time, had never met her. We went to Four Little Pigs, had some barbecue, and it was lovely. And then, he sort of did the thing he always does, gets a little opinionated about everything. And we didn't say anything, but it's just, and I don't even remember what my point was now, but it's hard to be around. It's hard to be around that, because I feel like he says, well, I don't watch Fox News. No, but you associate with people who do, and you're saying things that just simply aren't true. And I don't know how to have a conversation with you. And so I don't know. It's just it's tough.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just about to say it is tough. And back to James' point as well, is that no matter even how hard it is with family members, and we know that they may be inaccurate, either on both sides, like I said, because they don't have the whole information and they get all their information from one little piece. It's something that we've dealt with on the shows before, and I don't expect you to listen to our entire catalog, where we talk about physical media. And one of the problems with streaming, and we did a whole episode on this, and James has a great quote of, they can't take it away from me. It's over there on the shelf.
Yeah.
But when I pay for it monthly, Disney is going to not put, and I'm not saying pro or against Song of the South, but it just doesn't appear. And I know James will tell you, where does it appear at, James? You can buy it readily. Where?
England. Yeah.
It's in Europe.
Yeah. It's also free on YouTube. That's how I watched it.
Right. But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there's other movies that they have edited and that they have cut. And when you own it and buy it, most likely some of that money, especially back to VHS, I didn't know you guys got screwed that bad about DVD. Some of the money goes back to actual artists.
That's true.
Help create that, which leads me to, and we've had you on here, I told you I wouldn't keep you the whole 2 hours, but leads me to, how do we get asses back in the seats of theaters? And I'll tell you, no one loves movies more than the three guys talking to you. Well, I shouldn't say that, but we do. And it's tough for me to get my ass to a theater with a kid and a job, and they all have the same problem that I do. And knowing in 6 weeks that I didn't have to go see Renfield. I watched it last night when it premiered on Peacock, or it came out on Peacock this week.
Yeah.
And I'll do a review
Look,
for it for Scarefest.
I love Nick, and I still haven't seen it. And I saw the trailer and I was like, oh, okay, I'll go see that. I was busy. I haven't seen it.
It's killed. What has died? What has died?
I mean, it's convenience. It is so convenient for me to sit down with my family and watch it on the 65-inch TV.
It's 70. I just bought a new one down here in January. It's 75 inches. James's wife made a joke, and I was like, no, I'm totally compensating.
But I think the other part about that is that in the last few weeks, I have been to the movies more than I've been in the last year, and it's because of my son.
Mm-hmm.
It's because it's because
of what? Say that again.
My son. My son
yeah.
has it started with I don't know. These films are pretty obscure. They're very Shakespearean. It's a franchise called Fast and Furious. I don't know if anybody's heard of it.
No.
But my son saw the trailer for Fast X, and this is the same kid. I saw Monster
And then
Truck.
a porn.
Only the
all those
version
dirty
you
pictures. Sorry,
that's the one in space.
I wanted to bring it all the way back, way back.
But it's and the local theater, because Tuesday, I guess, is the day with the lowest ticket sales. If you go on Tuesday, it's cheap. It's just cheaper. Yeah. And so I just made the deal with him. If you see a trailer and it's a movie you want to see and it's something I don't feel bad about you seeing, we'll go on Tuesday. I teach in the evenings, so I have during the day free. And 10 o'clock on a random Tuesday, there may be 4 other people in that theater.
Yeah.
10 o'clock in the morning. But I've not seen a lot of epics, but I think, of course, the movies he's drawn to is what has the biggest explosion, what has the biggest, but I think and he wants to see it in the theater because it's that experience for him. It's that, the explosion is right there. We're in third or fourth row and it's right there. And I think that what I feel I've lost is, Ian McKellen in Holmes. Sherlock Holmes film that Ian McKellen did. I'm not seeing that in theaters anymore. As a matter of fact, I haven't seen a movie like that come to theaters anymore.
Well, all there are family films, horror films, superhero, Marvel, and what am I missing? I mean, it's all based on IP, intellectual property. So it's all IP. So what am I missing? Maybe there's not even been a Star Wars film in the last few years. So what am I missing?
That's it.
The biggest case in point is the big movie that I was excited to see this year was Sisu. And it was out for a grand total of 2 weeks before they took it out because all the other big movies were coming in.
We compare that to, say, Bloody Valentine, which was a 3D movie. And at the time, there were only, 800 3D theaters that actually worked to show you 3D. And we were out of the theater in 2 weeks, which was unheard of because Coraline had to come in. And there were only so many 3D theaters. So we were sharing. So we got our 2 week run, and then they came in and did their 2 week run. Then somebody else came in and did their run. That's unheard of back then because you would stay a lot longer. You would stay until you were no longer making money. We were still making money, but we had to come out. Now, 2 weeks is, if you can be in the theater for 2 weeks, that's amazing. Even if you're a blockbuster, you come out pretty quick. And I know the pandemic didn't help because we're all stuck at home. And so and certainly with Netflix, if you go back to the days of Netflix would always get movies after they were at the theater and then play them. And then Netflix made so much money that they started making their own movies. And in the beginning, they really weren't that good. And sometimes they still aren't that good, but they were making their own movies. And now everybody's doing their own and they're streaming their own. And so I don't know how we get back to the theater. I really don't.
Tarantino says it's probably dead.
I think he's right.
It's probably dead, and it's
the superhero movie is becoming what medical dramas are to TV.
Yeah.
So I was just curious about your thoughts about it before we rushed off. I just wanted to know, how do we get back to the cinema? And back to him, happened to be off last Monday, and went to see, oh God, the new Boogeyman. Did you see the new Boogeyman?
The Stephen King one?
Yeah. Well, I was happy to be in the theater. I was happy to be in the theater. But anyway,
But the other thing, Joe, real quick to your point though, is we saw drive-ins have a resurgence during COVID.
had a great time at the drive-in several times with my son.
Well,
3 and 4. Yeah.
and I think what's really funny is one of the local drive-ins, the Judy, has now made it a cottage industry. Like the other 2 weeks ago, they had John Schneider from Dukes of Hazzard, and they screened one of his films, and then he did a signing. But then they rolled into their regular films they were going to show. And this week they're having, I'm blanking on the name. It's a relatively well-known country musician who's doing something called like the Backroads Tour or something, and he's going to these small towns, but he's performing at 5 till dusk, and then they're going to show their movies.
Yeah.
And evidently they're selling out every weekend, but it's because they're doing this, for lack of a better term, value added stuff to remind people that they exist.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, so to wrap this up, unless gentlemen
wrap it up.
Yeah, I do.
You guys got to work tomorrow?
No, I don't have to work tomorrow. I was trying to be respectful of you bastard.
Well, I was going to ask a question. You guys don't teach, right?
James does. I teach adjunct 1 or 2 classes a year, but that's not my official title. And James,
I train class. I mean, I have training classes, not the same thing.
So you do all teach, because I thought you guys were all more in the.
I'm administrator. I'm an administrator, and then Chad is an instructional specialist for training for administration. Right, Chad?
And I worked with Joe for years, and it just eventually somebody offered me a faculty job, and it was tenure track. And I was told, if you don't take it when it's offered, it never comes around again.
So, then I do teach a class. I don't teach it. I work at the University of Kentucky, but I actually only teach a class at BCT's at the community college, because that's where I started out at. So I teach a class a semester. Sorry.
Well, the reason I ask is, as you know, I stopped. I didn't come have a beer with you. I went to see my brother, whose wife is a teacher, and to hear her talk about teaching, and I believe she's pre-high school.
Middle school.
Yeah, it is not a fun experience.
No, they make so I am currently the director of academic advising, which is academic advisors come in and tell you what to take and whatnot.
Yeah.
And they will make $10,000 more teaching in public school with tenure. And now when I post a job, it used to be attorneys who couldn't find jobs and want to be advisors. Now it's teachers trying to get out of the Kentucky teacher system and whatnot from other places.
Well, and I was about to say this, there was a study done this year. I actually I'm teaching a class in organization administration and higher education.
Yeah.
It's a thrilling class, I assure you. But
just put me telling it.
One of the things that I shared last week in class was they just published and I'm forgetting the organization, but it's basically all the presidents of all the land grant institutions, all the state colleges. And they did a survey of them. What are the 20 biggest fears they have? Number 2 on that list has nothing to do directly with the universities. It's exactly what you're talking about. The booming teacher shortages, where teaching in a public school system has gotten so underpaid. So depending on what state you're in, what location, all of that, but so challenging that we're seeing Kentucky is having teacher shortages, Tennessee, Mississippi, a lot of Florida are having these teacher shortages. And it's really funny that you would think, university presidents would cite censorship, and they do, but it's number 2 on their list is, how are we going to address K through 12? Because we know, obviously, if K through 12 falls, higher education's done. We can't admit people that aren't there.
Yeah.
And we do it, but yeah.
Well, but it was kind of shocking even to me. I told the students, I'm like, look at this list and what sticks out, and everybody all at once went number 2. And I was like, yeah. But the fact that university presidents are cognizant of that, and I'm not dissing university presidents, especially the one that pays my salary. Anyway, but it's the fact that usually they are more, I don't want to say insular, but you're paid to focus on your institution.
Yeah.
But the fact that that was number two, that education, K through 12 education writ large,
Yeah.
is facing such a lack of people that are having a good time teaching. It's work, it's hard. You're dealing with
Hmm.
students, and you're
Yeah.
dealing with communities that, not all students are supported by their families. We'll put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's very depressing that, I think that a university president who's probably making, I would say, low ball 300, $400,000 a year, many of them much more, are even saying, "Oh, we got to look at this K through 12 situation. We got to figure something out." So
Yeah.
I don't know, but it was very interesting that that popped up on their survey as the number two concern.
Well, it was certainly interesting to talk to her about it, because they come certainly, they lean more conservative than, say, I would lean.
Yeah.
But their issue was, it was a low income school. A lot of the kids do not have any support, and those who and most of the kids don't trust her at all. Like, they don't trust anything she says. They don't want to listen to her. They don't want to, like, it was a very difficult situation just to be a teacher.
It's very politicized, correct? Yeah.
It is, but at the same time, the kid, she was so just exhausted talking about it, just, because it's not fun. I mean, I didn't grow up in that. There were kids who didn't want to be there and certainly buck the system. And I was very Ferris Bueller, trying to get out of school as much as possible, but it was still a good education. It was good cafeteria. It was good, it was a good school. This does not sound like that is what she's dealing with. And I don't know which school she was at. I forgot to ask, but.
Well, but
Go ahead.
I think that's one of the challenges. And you mentioned low income. I mean, my children go to a quote unquote Title I low income school, and I always joke that you're in trouble when I'm among the financially elite parents, right? When you're
Yeah.
like, oh, you work at a public institution,
Yeah.
and you have, but it is one of the challenges that I think pops up often is education has just been cut so much, and it's a conversation. And I'm not an artist. I'm not, but I can remember I went to a school in the middle of nowhere, Kentucky, and we had an art teacher. And admittedly, the art teacher didn't have a classroom; they had a cart they pushed around. But we got art every day.
Yeah.
And I talked to my kids that don't. I mean, they don't get that. They get that, but it's because some teacher literally went above and beyond to say, "Listen, I've carved out some time. Let's do that."
Yeah.
And it's not, and so I don't know if it's curriculum changes but I also know part of the problem is, and I say this as a parent, is parents. I mean, is that's
Yeah.
it's for every, because I'm anti-censorship. I'm like, no, leave Huck Finn on the shelf. If a kid picks up Huck Finn and reads it and gets offended, at least they read a book. That's
Yeah.
that's forward momentum.
Yeah.
Then you can say, well, why are you offended? And you need to have a meaningful dialogue. Great.
Yeah.
But you know, it's the for every one person like me, they get somebody saying you can't do this. And I mean, even looking at student identities and student and all of that, Florida, it was don't say gay, and I know that's not the actual bill, but the way some teachers are pulled in different directions because some parents say, well, I don't want you to teach anything that acknowledges transgender issues. Well, then you have other parents saying, but that's my child. My
Yeah.
child is transgender. How are you going to ignore my child? And
Yeah.
I don't have a solution for it, but I also don't believe in sugarcoating and saying, okay, everybody gets to have an education that's directly acknowledging only what you want to believe. It's kind of like you were talking about Fox News or
Mhm.
any, if you only go to one source, you need that. I mean, I had teachers, luckily, that, and if I would have went home and told my parents, I'm like, they're making me do things I don't want to do. My father would have eye rolled so hard his eyes never would
Yeah.
have came back down. It would have been like,
Yeah.
that's what life is. You're going to do
Yeah.
stuff you don't want to do. Learn from it, and if you can argue with them,
Yeah.
more power to you. But do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe what we've lost, and that's why we have all those challenges of keeping people on. Because I mean, and sometimes actually I was able to look back even while I was a student and be like, okay, they were right, I was wrong. but I don't think the teacher that handed me Brave New World when I was a freshman in high school and said, read this. And it was, it's filled with sex and violence and people killing people because they're different and all that stuff. And never once did I think, I'm going to tell my parents I don't want to read this because of sex and violence.
Yeah.
Can we answer?
And I assume that's not handed out there now.
No, it's banned in a lot of. And matter of fact, that's actually I was going to be a high school teacher. I was trained to do so, and I was doing my final round of student teaching, and we were in we had a faculty meeting, which as part of my experience I was supposed to go to, and the principal began the conversation with saying, we need more AP English scores, we need our advanced placement college credit English score, we need more people to do better on those. We're doing well, but we need more. Obviously, if you do well, you got to do better next time, right? Well,
gooder.
Yeah, even betterer. But anyway, but by the end of the meeting, it was about 15 minutes later. He said we're also getting. He said we're getting parent complaints about certain things, and they want us to take these books out of the curriculum. And he was naming off books, and I literally looked over at my the person that was my supervising teacher, and she literally just mouthed the words, "Do you want to do it?" And I was like, "Okay." And I was like, "Okay, you can pick one or the other." And the principal looked at me, and I was like, I'm never getting a job at this school." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "Every book you've named is a book on the AP English list. Brave New World, Huck Finn." I was like, "If we censor those, if we take those out, or even it wasn't even taking them out of the library, it was don't assign them in class. If we don't assign those in class, and they try to take the AP Lit test, these things don't work.
Yeah.
You can't say, okay, don't teach Brave New World, don't, because it's on the list. It's on, and then we get into entire conversation, should we be teaching to a test anyway? But I can only fight so many battles. Right. But I mean, that was actually the moment when I was like, I'm not going to teach in a high school. I can't. That debate shouldn't happen in my humble opinion, because if you're going to get a credential, if you're going to be, we wouldn't say to somebody that wanted to be a medical doctor, oh, you want to be a medical doctor, but you feel icky about blood, we won't make you do anything with blood then. We would not accept that as an option.
No.
Why do we allow that exception for art?
Yeah.
Why would we allow that? Oh, well, you want to study literature, but you don't want to read about anything that might involve sex or violence or anything. Well, I don't know. We might have a Care Bears the movie novelization sitting around, but other than that, what are we supposed to teach you from? So I don't. But it is actually that moment right there was when I decided I'm going to go back to college. I'm going to get a degree in higher education, where I don't have to censor myself as much, and we'll see what happens.
You still do. All right.
Oh, you still do. I mean, I don't to Joe, but other than that, I try to be kind to others.
Todd.
Yes.
Before we go, one last question. You're buying a castle. It's in Peru, Portugal. I don't know. I failed.
He's not good. He's not good with maps. Just tell him Pennsylvania. Good with maps.
It's in Russia. All right, you're buying a castle. Is this going to be? And I don't know how familiar you are with this. Is this going to be one of those Charlie Band castles, and you're going to shoot 10 horror films in it over the next 2 months?
So when we went to, we had a couple of places we wanted to see when we first went over there.
I'm not hearing no.
You're not hearing no. Of course not. You're hearing no. So there were a couple of places we wanted to see. This place, it took us a while to see. And so when we finally got there, there's a I don't know what you would call it. It's an arched, it's arched, but it's very long. And there's wine vines, grapevines growing so you're walking down through, and it's probably 50 yards long. And as we're walking down through there, I looked over to Ida and I was like, can you imagine if something was chasing us through here? And she goes, I was thinking the same thing. So yes, we're going to shoot stuff there. Absolutely.
That's what I was hoping. That's what I'm hoping.
It's 12 acres, and there's 9 buildings in addition to the wee castle. And so several of those buildings are giant, and one of them is probably 3 stories tall, which we would easily put in green or blue screen, depending on what's hot at the time, and create a little studio and go to town.
All I'm hearing, Bonehead goes to Peru. I
Or
know.
Portugal.
I know. I know.
I mean,
it's
granted,
Portugal.
Peru is
Hold on
is
for
in
a second.
completely, but that's fine.
I'm an idiot in making the joke, but besides that,
You are closer to Peru than you are Portugal, technically speaking.
well, that's all I'm hearing is that I thought we were going to do this thing in Ireland, but since now we're going to Peru, oh, fine then. Oh, that'll be funny. Where's Joe? Peru. Don't tell him. Don't tell him.
No, don't tell me.
Don't tell
The
him.
best, like that seems like something you would cut to in a movie where it's just you wandering around. It's almost like
Romancing the Stone.
yeah.
It's basically I'm Joan Wilder.
Yeah.
There you go. That's it.
Well, what I love about being over there is, because when you're in Europe, you can basically take the train anywhere.
Yes.
And so I like the idea that we have that access. And so it's going to be interesting. It's terrifying. But again, this time next week, we'll be in a plane. So,
how much are you taking with you?
Trying to actually, it's funny you mentioned that. I'm trying to decide what tools I can take.
Yeah.
What I have room for, what I don't have room for, because the place does need some work. So I'm taking all of my Makitas are already over there. I've got a chop saw down there that I don't even know if I'll be able to take it. My skill saw is still here, so I have to put that in a suitcase somewhere. And but like my drills and my multi-tools and all that stuff's my cousin took all that stuff over there because he flies for Aer Lingus.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so
That's nice.
so I'll pick those up from him when we get there.
Yeah.
And
I was about to say, paying shipping on that shit, it's almost probably cheaper to buy it there than it would be to ship it.
some of it, I mean, the chop saw and the nail gun, that stuff's pricey. So if I can get those in a box, but the problem is finding a box that will fit those weird sized things.
Yeah,
and then clothes and.
I can't believe you took the time for us to have a 2-hour chat in the middle of this. You have no idea how much that means to us.
I can't imagine it means that much.
It does. Hey,
you called me beautiful before recording. It made my day.
That is true. I did do that.
That's because you both have the same head.
Yeah, by the way, for our listeners of the YouTube, I'm wearing a hat because I had been working relentlessly and was sweating so bad that I didn't want to blind everybody with my sweaty glee.
All right, so
get out there and get you a little sun on it.
Oh, it is.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
do you see the shiny?
Nice. Yeah, that's nice. That's nice.
Todd, thank you so much.
All of us.
Thank you so much. I swear to God, all I want to do is give him some time back because I'm trying to be respectful of his time, and he's the one that keeps talking.
I can't help it.
I know. I like talking to you too. Well, hopefully you will have.
He didn't say that.
No, that's true.
That's true. He just said he liked to talk, and he did call himself a narcissistic bastard earlier. So yeah, he just wanted to talk about himself. Hopefully they have internets in Peru.
They do. It's very fast.
See, here's the thing: is I've now said the joke that later I will just say Peru, and I'll forget.
Yes, you probably will.
Yeah, because I'm a dumbass. All right.
Yes.
So we're going to log off now, gentlemen. Let's give it up for Todd Farmer one more time to explain to us why we don't understand any rules or regulations of the WGA.
I can't imagine I helped anyone understand anything, but you're very kind.
No, I think you did. All right.
Well, as I say, it gives context. At least people now have a context that, there's not a check coming every week or every month.
That is true. There's not. Sometimes we need a little extra money to help us float.
Right. All right. This has been Bonehead.